All right. Welcome back to EDHTakes episode 11. I'm Elijah Samuelson.
And I'm Spencer Cook.
And today, I have a question. Spencer, has EDH ruined Magic?
Well, that's a interesting question. That seems a bit loaded there, Eli.
Seems, is it bait? Who knows?
I guess we'll have to wait and find out, right? Haha. But, so yeah, the main thing we're going to be talking about today is, Magic and how Commander has affected Magic, mainly stuff like its design, the design of Magic cards. A lot of players will say things like, they are designing too many cards with Commander in mind, or vice versa. So why don't you kind of get us into that, Eli?
Yeah, so as the game of Magic grows, more and more players continue to be drawn to the more casual side of Magic. Commander has now been found to be the most popular way to play Magic, and with the surge in popularity, it stands to reason that it is in with WOTC's best interest to cater to Commander players more as they come to represent the majority of the player base. However, many players have noted that the response by WOTC may have gone too far, and Commander may have changed the way that Magic sets are designed forever. Additionally, as with Wizards of the Coast continues to cater to Commander players, many players seem to have a growing sense of entitlement. There is now a large section of the player base that will only evaluate cards on whether or not they are playable in Commander, often disregarding other formats and ways to play Magic.
Yeah, and that's a lot to say, but I think, just kind of a more informal description of that is that, Magic is pretty complicated, and we're just kind of going to try to delve into all of the ways that people approach the idea of Wizards printing cards for Commander, and then kind of decide and hopefully come to a conclusion of if overall it's a good thing or a bad thing, maybe weigh the pros and cons and stuff. Yeah,
so we have some things we wanted to go over first of what it means to design cards for Commander specifically.
Because that's not, it seems pretty clear, right? But there's, as players, we don't really have a very direct way of knowing that, right? Because Wizards doesn't just say, this card in a standard set was designed for Commander. We have to kind of decide that for ourselves. Right?
Yeah, I think where the card is printed probably has a good indication. If something is in a Commander precon, obviously that card is made for Commander, but people like to look at cards even within standard sets or things like Modern Horizons and be like, well, this card is clearly made for Commander. And maybe that's not always the case.
It certainly can be the case for a large portion of the legendary creatures in Modern Horizons 2, for example. But I remember there was a post from Mark Rosewater on his Blogatog. Someone had been asking him about something related to them printing cards for Commander in the Modern Horizons sets, and he said something along the lines of, we want to be printing cards for Commander, and we are doing that, but we're also printing, a large part of these cards in Modern Horizons 2 and Modern Horizons 1 are printed for what they call something like a casual modern format, so just modern but not at the competitive level. So that's just an example of when an EDH player might look at some of these cards and say, well, obviously this isn't going in a modern deck, like a competitive modern deck, so it must be a Commander card. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes they do print cards for, what is known as kitchen table Magic.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people forget about recently, that other 60 card casual formats might exist.
Yeah, so, for example, when they see a card like Smothering Tithe printed in, I think that was just in a standard deck, or standard, in the set, right? In Throne of Eldraine?
Yeah, in, Ravnica Allegiance.
Oh, Ravnica Allegiance, sorry, I don't know why I was thinking that. Players would think, okay, this is a Commander plant, and while there's definitely a good argument that is a Commander card, you can't say for certain that was their intention. So this makes you want to bring up the idea of, cards, I think cards can be designed with maybe, a percent of formats in mind. So maybe they design that card 20% for standard, 15% for casual or whatever, and then the 65 or whatever the rest is for Commander. Obviously those numbers are arbitrary and they don't really mean anything, but I don't think it's really almost ever the case that a card is designed wholly for one format, unless, like you said, Eli, stuff like Commander product, that's pretty obviously has to be for Commander, right?
Yeah, that Commander Legends, Commander Precons. Yeah. Those are pretty obviously Commander stuff, but even something like the Brawl decks, those cards, you could say, well, those are made for Brawl, but like those have some very strong commanders in them.
Yeah, and sets that are a little bit like strange, like Battle Bond and Jumpstart. Like the Jumpstart definitely seems like a commander product, but really, I think Jumpstart was just made as like a casual kind of draft between your friends product.
I think that literally was like the kitchen table, like just pick up and play Magic set.
But you'll see like strong legendary creatures in that set, and then people will immediately jump to commander. And while it is a good, I mean, it's I'm not going to say that they didn't design the mill commander from that set for commander, but like, you know, I wouldn't say wholly for commander, you know, not entirely so. So kind of what the point I'm getting from this is that it's a little bit confusing to figure out what is designed for commander outside of the explicitly designed for commander product. So I just think a problem is players will kind of only view cards as black and white.
Yeah, we'll see just about every preview season now, and we might elaborate more on this in a further along episode. But how people will look at like even like commons and uncommons and like be like, is this card good for commander? It's like, well, it's not for commander, right?
Yeah, and they're going and more so than just like evaluating the power level of a card. They'll be like, Wizards isn't addressing these issues by looking at like, you know, this commander issue. They could have made this better for commander if they changed it this way. Well, it's a common and it's supposed to fit the draft format, right? Like you can't always appeal to commander as a format in every card they make. I think some commander players kind of seem to want that. I don't know if they actually do want that, but that seems to be what they want.
Yeah, like I was saying in the kind of the intro segment, the more and more Wizards caters to commander players, it seems like in some ways the more and more people want, and that's I think that is changing how Magic is created, how sets are designed.
And you know, one thing that if we can just go on a short tangent, I don't want to always bring this up, Elad, but you know, white cards, right? There's been a lot of arguments about white cards lately, and on that topic of players, you know, kind of just like wanting more and more and more, you know, they've been designing a lot of good, you know, white cards, a lot of card advantage for white, stuff like that. But every time a new one comes out, the first response is always, thanks, but when's the next one? Or thanks, but what's next? Or
this is a good step in the right direction.
That's what they say. They say, this is a good step, but we'll check back in a year and a half. That's what they say. And, like, this I don't know, like, what they want, right? Because, and I don't think this is the case outside of Commander, because I don't think there's players in you know, more, 60-card formats are really, you know, this hyper-focused on a specific color getting certain cards, right?
And I apologize if we've said this before, but there's always this thing the Command Zone does where they're like, oh, white got however many good cards this set, but green got like twice that many good cards, so white isn't catching up to where green is at because green also got good cards. But the thing is, like, those good green cards that might be coming out, and a lot of the time, is my opinion, they're not even that great. But people like just hold white to such a higher standard that these green cards will come out and people will be like, green got so much more better stuff, and now white needs to catch up to that. But really, like, those new green cards, they're not changing anything. They're not better than the cards that already existed.
Like, this might be a bad example because you might disagree with me here, but they made the new Eternal Witness, right? Mm-hmm. The one with Eternalize in Modern Horizons 2. I think it's a pretty good card, but I don't think it's better than Eternal Witness. And I don't think, I mean, you might want multiple Eternal Witnesses in your deck, but, like, they already have several other good ones, right?
I agree. You might want more of them, but it doesn't replace your Eternal Witness. It's not a strictly better Eternal Witness.
And they have 2 or 3 other ones that are also in contention for that one, so... Mm-hmm. But, that's... So something that I want to bring up here, just to put a kind of... A last thing about this topic that I was talking about, but is that the Commander players, at least ones that, you know, have this kind of... They want to see white do better, and they want more from white. A problem that a thing they do that really frustrates me is it seems like they hold every white card to a level of scrutiny that they don't hold the other colors to. So what I mean by this is, you know, you'll see a white rare and it'll be kind of medium or you know, even a decent card, and they'll be like, this could have been better. You could have fixed white by, or, you know, you could have, you know, made this a really good white card. But then, like, they'll look at half of the green cards in Modern Horizons 2 and they won't bat an eye about, you know, how they're not really Commander playable. So that's a thing that really frustrates me. So for example, that 6-mana white 4/6 card from Modern Horizons 2, which says whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, you put that many counters on each creature you control.
Oh yeah, Nykthos Exemplar.
Yeah, they what was it? I think the
EDH
Retcast was talking about how like this card just they could have they talked about how this card was an example of Wizards being too safe with white cards.
Want to.
Wow.
This is a super perfect example of an overly conservative white design on a card.
I agree.
So
And it's like, I have never heard you say anything about, any of the bad black, red, green, or blue cards that are quote unquote too safe and not pushed. So I don't like this level of scrutiny that white is being held to.
Yeah, and that card maybe is a victim of its status as a card that does appear to have been maybe at least mostly designed for Commander. Like if we were going to go by that percentage, like I could see, maybe it's okay in like for a limited format or like
sure, maybe
something.
that's like a 70% Commander card or something, right?
Yeah, and then that's maybe the reason that they subject it to so much extra scrutiny.
Yeah, but did not try to make this about white cards, but it just kind of fits into that idea we were talking about of players getting more and more a little bit entitled about Magic card design, right? Maybe that's not the right way to say it, but something like that.
Yeah, and they make a lot of assumptions too. Like another thing that I think somebody said on the EDH Retcast was like, "Oh, if this white card was a green card, it would have cost 2 mana." It's like
It's super okay.
Yeah, 4 mana is a lot for this. Not to keep comparing stuff to green, but it wouldn't cost 4 mana in green. It would be 1 in a green or something.
Instead of 3
no,
mana
you
or
don't know
whatever.
that. Like that's not very charitable. Like you're just like you're assuming that there's like some like that Wizards is like trying to like there's the white is bad meme and they're like trying to make that a thing. I really don't think they are.
Yeah, that's a bit strange. But just to move on from that there, we should probably talk about, if we think when they design cards for Commander, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? So I think we should kind of, or at least look at to what degree it is good and bad. So let's talk about some of the pros associated with them designing cards for Commander. Because I'm sure there's viewers among you guys that really like when they design cards for Commander, and some that like kind of think they shouldn't be designing cards for Commander, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of people that have just gotten a little bit sick of it.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at some of the upsides of it. Some good things that you can take away from this.
And there's definitely a lot of good and bad, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's start. Want to start off with the first one, Eli?
Yeah, first thing we put down is it gives Wizards the ability to make cards that they think Commander players would like. Now, it seems like a pretty broad thing, but I think, for the most part, Wizards, they want to make money, so they want to make cards that people enjoy playing with. They want you to enjoy the game, right?
Mm-hmm. So it gives them an excuse to kind of design cards they think players will like. Now, whether or not they succeed in making cards they think players will like is a different story, but like at least it gives them the option to have more outlets to make cards for Commander, right? Mm-hmm. And I think everyone likes everyone likes playing Commander. Everyone likes cards that they like, so hopefully they can make more cards that you like.
Yeah, I mean, as much as people like to crap on Wizards sometimes, every time a new Commander product or like a series of decks comes out, I'll see people like talking about the new Commanders and how much they like the design, or like they're like, oh, this cool Commander, this one's new and it's really awesome. So there's always some good.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't be getting as much of that if they weren't designing specifically for Commander. There would still be cool legendary creatures and stuff from standard sets and things, but you would see, a decent amount less of it, I would say.
Mm-hmm. All right, then our next thing is somewhat related, but it opens up new design space for Magic cards.
So, for example, just the most basic idea is cards like Command Tower, and we don't need to get into whether or not that's good or bad for the format, but it is a land that directly references something that only works in Commander, right?
Yeah, and Commander has unique mechanics that can be referenced in cards specifically made for Commander, and these cards won't function on other formats, so you won't have to like compete with other formats for, I guess, like your card like prices and stuff. Like,
yeah, like if they make a card with like Oloro, the Ageless Ascetic, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
He's got the effect where when he's in your command zone or on the field, he gains 2 life every one of your upkeeps, and that's a card that is designed only because they're designing cards for a Commander product. They could not make that card in like a standard set or something like that.
Yeah, and I think they've gotten better about this, whereas like, not that it was specifically linked to a Commander-based mechanic, but like in the original, or I mean I think the second year of Commander Precons, they made something like True Name Nemesis.
Yeah.
And like what, Flusterstorm?
Yeah, those were in the Grixis commander deck, whatever that one was called. Jaleva, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, I think True Name was in Jaleva, and then Flusterstorm was in Riku.
Yeah, but I think love or hate the mechanics from the command zone, whatever you say about them. I think there definitely is some potential to make cool, interesting cards. So, for example, like I imagine there's some of you might not like Oloro because he sits there and gains 2 life every turn. But do you hate every single like Eminence mechanic or something like that? Because I would venture to guess that there's at least one that you like, or at least if you don't like one of them, they could make one in the future that you might like. So, for example, like the Ur-Dragon, who has that ability that reduces the cost of your dragons, or the cat, what is that card called? That makes it so, like, if you have a cat in your combat...
Arabo.
Yeah, or Arabo, you can pump up a cat on your combat. Or just a couple examples of cards that have, effects in the command zone that let them kind of make interesting new cards.
Yeah, obviously they have to be a little bit careful with mechanics like that.
Yeah.
But I think mostly, those cards exist right now, and I don't really hear anybody being like, oh my gosh, I don't like Eminence, but it's broken.
Or what is it? Experience counters is another example of that, right? Or I guess the one that people would probably take issue with, if any of them, would be Derevi, right? Because he's got that ability to put him into play from the command zone.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in that camp. I think Derevi is kind of dumb, but it's not broken.
Oh,
it's annoying.
And the Commander Ninjutsu Yuriko, right?
Yuriko is broken.
Yeah, that one's also pretty good.
Freaking hate Yuriko.
But even if they make a couple broken cards, that's not to say that they shouldn't have the ability to use these mechanics. So, for example, this is just a hypothetical, and I wouldn't even necessarily be happy about this sort of thing, but, let's say they make some crazy new commander that's, you can't even cast it from your command zone, but it has, an effect every turn or something, right? That's like I said, I probably wouldn't even like that much, but, the idea that we can, kind of go in that direction might be... There's potential to have some good design of cards, right? There's potential for it, at least.
Yeah, I quite like the mechanic that, rewards you for playing your commander more times, like the Commander Storm cards, or they'll occasionally have, I think they have, Commander's Insignia that's, an anthem for the amount of times you played your commander.
Yeah.
Cards like that I think are pretty neat, or Jessica, that, scale up, they kind of reward you for first having to play your commander, and then, if it keeps getting killed and, you go later into the game, it scales up. I think those cards are pretty neat.
Yeah, so that's a cool thing that only comes from, Commander product, which I think is really cool. So that's, another well, that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. So next we have the idea that, if they're designing cards for Commander, and especially at the rate that they are right now, where they're designing a lot of Commander product, it means we're going to get, more support for tons of different kinds of strategies. So, for example, they just, this isn't necessarily for Commander, but they just, released a bunch of squirrel tribal cards. People have been wanting that for a long time. Maybe not myself, but, that's a strategy that people have been interested in. They made Osgir, the Reconstructor, in a Commander product. People have been wanting, a lot of these, kind of equipment matters cards they added in to there. So, you get a lot of support for different kinds of playstyles, right?
Yeah, up until, Commander Legends, you could make a pirate deck, but not, a really good pirate deck. But now, we have a friend that plays a pirate partners deck with a lot of cards just from Commander Legends, and then some, supplemental, tribal good stuff cards. Oh, yeah. And, that's a really good deck now.
It's actually, really, really strong. Just with, a solid 10 or 15 cards for Commander Legends, it's actually... There's, a lot of really good pirates now. There's the one that Treasonous Act something whenever it or another pirate comes into play.
Yeah, Coercive Recruiter.
That card is amazing, and so is the Malcolm, when it gets a million treasures all the time.
Yeah, Malcolm the Navigator, and Breach is the Goblin Pirate guy. I don't know what his position is.
Yeah, but so these are things that could possibly come from standard sets and stuff like that, but not nearly at the pace, right?
Well, and I think that deck is strong now off the back of those cards they designed in Commander Legends to be good in pirate tribal decks.
Yes. So that's really cool, and I like that. But that being said, I think this is a good transition to move on to some of the cons of design cards for Commander, especially right now, is that I think a lot of us are experiencing a phenomenon known as product fatigue.
Yeah,
related to Commander.
So we were saying how lots of new cards gives you more options and stuff to play with, and it supports more strategies, but that's kind of it's a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm. Because, like, lately, you know, just in the last year or two, like, last year was the year of Commander, right? And it seems like this year we're getting even more Commander product than last year. And, you know, there's an argument of whether that is going to continue or not. But, like, you know, now that we're getting Commander decks with almost every set release, and, like, every set kind of feels like a Commander set, even if it's not the case. Like, for example, Time Spiral Remastered wasn't a Commander set, and it was all reprints, but, like, it feels like a Commander set because it's like, oh, these foil blinged out versions of all these Commander cards, right? So it can get very, very, like I said, fatiguing as a player trying to keep up. You know, as soon as a spoiler season ends, a new one starts, and it's like, oh, I gotta look at all these Commander cards.
Yeah, I've gotten to the point where I almost kind of pick and choose which sets I'm going to invest in, because you can't afford to... I mean, the average person can't afford to buy product from every Magic set now.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
realistic.
Unless you're just getting a couple singles, but, like, also, like, it's a significant time investment for you to, for me at least, to update my decks. So, you know, I'll probably only update my decks every couple sets or so, and I only have, like, 4 decks. Like, imagine if you have 30 decks, like some players.
Yeah, I have, I think around 15 decks right now, and I have to be very careful, even with that amount of decks lately, to make sure when I see a new card come out that I'm sure it's better than what I have in my deck right now, because I've had cards from a new set that'll come out, and I'll try them out in my deck, and I'll switch that card out of my deck before I've even played with it, because then the next set comes out and something better comes out.
Yeah. And just to clarify, when I said I have 4 decks, I mean, I'm the kind of person who likes to take decks apart and build new ones, so I've probably played over, 20 or 30 decks in my Commander, history, but,
right.
Just 4 at the moment. Don't judge me for not, don't call me like a Commander newbie.
No, I think you've got the right idea, because I even had to, with one of my recent decks I wanted to make, I was like, I wanted to make a new Boros deck, but I knew I shouldn't, so I'm like, I don't have that much fun playing my mono red deck, I'll just take that one apart and use a lot of the same cards.
Yeah. Well, another thing that, is kind of a problem for, designing cards for Commander is that, I mean, I don't know about you, Eli, but I think sometimes when WOTC designs cards that they think are fun for Commander, they end up just being kind of unfun, or like, they miss the mark, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, I've heard some people discuss the idea that Wizards is trying to manufacture, like, the fun and the political side of Commander, like, within their products. Like, within the precons, they'll have, like, stuff like the Vow Cycle or, like, curses and stuff that is trying to, like, maybe it's a good thing to incentivize, like, politics and, like, interaction between players, but sometimes I think they miss the mark a little bit.
Yeah, or, like, the hidden choose a player... to choose a hidden information cards or whatever, right?
Yeah, and a lot of those cards are fine in the environment of playing precons against each other, and like can be good in those games, but those are the cards I don't see people actually play a lot of those cards in their actual decks.
Yeah, I think like you were telling me earlier today, Eli, before we did the episode, the Vows are cards that, while they're pretty fun in a precon environment, they're the first cards to get cut from any precon, for sure, right?
Yeah, they're very low power and low impact a lot of the time.
That being said, I think there's something to be said about making cards that can fill out and have a good precon experience, and then you can replace them. That's not, like, inherently bad. Mm-hmm. But, like, cards like Aeon Engine out of one of the recent precons from a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah, this is our go-to example. It was in the Anji Falconwrath deck.
Yeah.
And it's a 5-mana artifact that enters tapped, and you can tap it and exile it to reverse the turn order, which is a super unique effect for Magic, and I'm glad that it is, because as it turns out, reverse the turn, like, people are like, oh, it's funny, it's like in Uno. Well, see, that works in Uno, because that's a much faster game. But
much more simple, yeah.
In Commander, how that works is you play Aeon Engine, and you pass your turn to the next player. And at the end of that player's turn, you can activate your Aeon Engine, and it goes back to your turn. So what you've done, the person who's going to go after the player going after you, they just lose their turn.
Yeah. And, like, it's not particularly fun either. It just seems like such a, like, what you're doing is, like, you're using your whole, first of all, you're using, like, your whole turn, I mean, in the early game to play, like, a 5-mana cost artifact, right? And then, like, you're going to wait a whole turn for it to come around, then you're going to just get, like, one turn after the turn after you, or you can try to do it at like a random time to like king make or something. I don't know. The card is I'm very adamant that this card is like the opposite of fun to play with or play against. It feels terrible every time for everybody. That's a bit of a hot take there, but I'd go out on a limb on that.
Yeah, if absolutely, if you have any ideas on what you think the worst like artificial fun card that's been made for Commander is, let us know, because I'd like to know if there's one worse than Aeon Engine, or if you actually have done or like seen something fun happen with Aeon Engine, I'd be interested to hear that, but I don't buy it. I don't think it's...
the funniest thing you can do with Aeon Engine is to make like infinite tokens of it and then just like keep reversing the turn order so that one person doesn't get a turn ever. That's a little bit funny, but like it's not actually fun. But
yeah,
I'm someone who is... I'm just going to say I've played the Anji Falconwrath precon more than most people probably. I've probably played, 20 or 30 games of just the precon, like straight out the box or whatever, just because, it was a deck that we had at some place that we'd play, and, I would get tired of my decks, be like, hey, let me pull out that precon. I actually really like that deck. And, that deck made me want to build my current Anji deck that I have because it was just so fun. And the best thing about Anji is that you can just loot away all these terrible, unfun cards that you draw. So, like, there's a couple cards in that deck that just, like, kind of are super expensive and do nothing, like Aeon Engine, that you can just get rid of right away. And I did try to use it one or two times, and it was absolutely disgustingly terrible.
Oh, look, I drew Aeon Engine in the trash.
Exactly, right away. Well, so moving on from the idea of Wizards kind of being not always being on the dot for what they think is fun or whatever for Commander... there's the issue of, like, power creep in Commander products. Because when they're designing cards specifically for Commander, sometimes there's an argument that they go too far and they make cards that are kind of broken for the format.
Yeah, they make, like, super staples sometimes.
Yeah, and maybe that's not a great thing. Maybe we don't want to have super staples for Commander. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say definitively that that's the case, but there's a strong argument against them, right?
Yeah, I think we're both of the opinion that we very rarely would say this card goes in every deck of this color. I don't like to say that because you might have reasons why you don't want to do something, and there's always a reason you can make why you don't want to play a card.
Even if like the deck would be better with a card in it, like you don't always want to be doing that thing, right? Like maybe because you just don't want to be that guy, or maybe it's you don't have fun in winning this way every time. But like not every red deck that I build will have Dockside Extortionist in it, even if it would probably be better with it in it.
But I think if there's a card that comes out in a Commander precon where somebody could easily make the argument, this goes in even 80% of decks with this color in it, I think that might be some cause for concern, maybe. Yeah,
there might be at least a hint that maybe they should try to avoid that in the future. So, like, a couple cards just to mention are, Teferi's Protection, Dockside Extortionist, the free cycle, Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting Swat, Deadly Relic, mostly those three, not the other two as much. These are examples of cards that are pretty much as close to auto-includes as you can get without actually being the case. And, well, maybe not Deadly Relic, but whatever. But the idea is, like, one of the big problems with this is that these cards get expensive. And they're not reprinted anywhere else, at least yet. I guess Teferi's Protection was recently, but when that card was at its height, it was like $50, $60. And now it's, I think, $30, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's still always going to be a card like that where it's so strong. And Teferi's Protection to me is like one of the white cards that I personally would put in just about every one of my white decks if I could.
And I think Dockside's like $60, but the point here is that there's two issues. One is the issue of power level, and the other is the issue of cost, right? Like price, monetary value. And I think they're both problems, right?
Yeah, so in a Commander precon set, if a card is marked at the rare rarity, what that means, or what I've learned that means it's just in one of the precons. If it's an uncommon, that means it's probably in all of them, or like a common. But if it's a rare, that means it's just in one deck.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting thing that you tipped me off to earlier, Eli. So, like, for example, I think, Bonder's Ornament is a card that they made, and that was an uncommon in the Commander precons, and that showed up in all five of them.
Yep, that one's common. That's in all of them. So I think an uncommon might be it's in like a couple of them.
Oh yeah, that's a common. You're right, because it's in Pauper and stuff. So, for example, the rare is like Archaeomancer's Map, which is pretty good card, right? That's a rare, and it's only in the Osgear deck.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting thing. Maybe they should try to just reprint these cards more. That's what I would like, right?
Yeah, if there was a way to get these cards in some other product, because like having to buy a whole Commander deck just for one card, like I remember our local game store had like a Black Friday sale or something where they had the deck with Dockside in it, the Mystic Intellect, for like $30 or something, and I'm like, well, I guess I have to buy that because I want another Dockside Extortionist, and that cost $30 at the time that I bought that.
Yeah. So it was kind of like a no-brainer, right? And maybe that's not a great thing, right? It also, when they make these really, really powerful cards that are like go in every deck, it drives up the price because they eliminated MSRP. So, I think the deck with Archaeomancer's map, the Osgear deck, is the most expensive of all the...
it has the highest overall value of all the precons, so they have to, like, stores, and they should probably, like, mark up the price a little bit to make sure that people don't just, like...
buy those out and no one
they don't
can get
sell
them.
out of it.
But yeah, that's an unfortunate consequence of when they make cards specifically for Commander, right? Do you want to talk about this Clarion Community College video?
Yeah, so when we were doing the notes for this, we went back and tried to get some other opinions, and I remember, I think it was way back in 2016 now was when this episode was from, but the professor and Josh Lee Kwai from the Command Zone, they used to do this series called In Response, where it was like a debate show, and it was actually a pretty good series. It's too bad that they stopped it. I guess Josh is probably just a lot busier now, but I wish the professor would restart it with somebody else. And on their first episode, they debated about like we're talking about here, are cards that are designed just for Commander a good thing or a bad thing for the format? And the professor took the stance of that they are not good for Commander.
Mm-hmm. Or at least he argued that stance in the video. He might not agree fully with it, but you have to take in a debate. You have to take both. You have to take a side, right?
Yeah.
So one of his arguments against cards designed for Commander is that cards like he would mention cards like Command Tower, Commander's Sphere, and Homeward Path being cards that kind of reduce your deck size because they kind of just are like auto includes in your deck. So he says, we have a 98 card Commander deck now with Command Towers, 97 card with Commander's Sphere, and so on and so forth with other cards that they print for Commander.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this, Eli?
Yeah, so I see what he's saying, and I can empathize with his position, but I disagree with the idea that you have to just because a card is good or they were talking about the Command Tower thing, and then Josh his point back was to say, well, what are you replacing if it's a land that they're doing this with, what are you missing? You're just replacing a basic land out of your deck with it.
Yeah, and that's a decent rebuttal, but it also doesn't work for the non-land cards, right?
Right. And so specifically the professor at this time, his example of a non-land card was Commander's Sphere, which I would argue doesn't even make the cut for most people.
Yeah, I think Commander's Sphere, it's probably one of my favorite 3-mana rocks, but I tend not to run as many of them as I used to, right? And I don't think Commander's Sphere makes the cut a decent amount of the time, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that just don't like 3-mana rocks anymore.
Granted, this was in 2016, so the environment was different, probably was more popular back then.
Right.
But, I'm a person who I'm very willing to not play, cards that other people will play, and for whatever reason I want. I made a Thrixmithy's, the Slumbering Isle deck at one point where I just played basic lands. I didn't even play Command Tower because I was, call me a bad person, but I was playing back to basics in that deck, and I opened one in a pack, and I was like, oh, this could be fun to just, and I'll play all basics, whatever, right? And my deck probably wouldn't have even been worse if I played a Command Tower, but I just didn't feel the need to. And I think that's a thing that Commander players should try to move towards is being okay not playing quote unquote staples. You can if you want to, but you should try to not feel forced to, I think.
Yeah, you shouldn't feel like you have to play something.
You don't need to play a Soul Ring. I think, Eli, you have a deck that doesn't play Soul Ring,
I have
correct?
a couple decks that don't play Soul Ring, and I think it was Rachel Weeks of the Commander Advisory Group doing a poll on Twitter asking for some advice on a card to cut, and she was she had a Rakdos Lord of Riots deck, and he costs red, red, black, black, and he already like reduces the colorless cost of all your big Eldrazi and stuff in that deck once you get them out. And she's like, I think I might want to cut Sol Ring from this deck. Like, what do you guys think, or something like that? And everyone was just like, man, you gotta play Sol Ring though.
You gotta
have to.
And it is pretty compelling. Like, Sol Ring's a great card, obviously, but like, there's at least a thought to be had there about, what, it's not maybe we're taking for granted the idea of, not for granted, but we're not really examining the fact that Sol Ring is a card that you have to choose to play in your deck. It's not just going in right before you put any cards in the deck, right?
Yeah, if you're somebody like the Professor that feels like, well, I mean, Sol Ring exists, so I have to play Sol Ring in my deck, and that takes away some of my agency. Why don't you just take that back? You can cut the Sol Ring out of your deck.
Yeah, you can take back your agency. There you go. I like that.
If that bothers you, like, you have that choice, and like, I wouldn't ever, if somebody told me I don't play Sol Ring in any of my decks, I'd be like, that's really cool, actually. Mm-hmm. You probably have more unique decks than I'm used to seeing if you're doing stuff like that, I think.
Yeah. So another, a positive and a negative. I'll start off with the positive is that, or you could argue either way, but Commander is a format. It's an eternal format, which means like there's no rotation or whatever to get your cards to rotate out. And the rules committee for Commander is very conservative with bannings. This is the part that could be positive or negative. You might disagree or agree whether they should ban more cards or unban more cards, but that's neither here or there. What is a potential downside is that when Wizards makes a new powerful card, for example, the Commander Legends, Hull Breacher type stuff, if it's not getting banned, which it probably won't get banned, it's going to stick around for most of the format, right? Forever, potentially. Yeah. So that's a possible downside, was whenever Wizards makes these quote-unquote mistakes, we're kind of stuck with them unless the Rules Committee decides to take action.
Yeah, so I think most Commander players are broken up into two camps. There's either a group of people who think that like 5 or 10 cards should be taken off of the ban list because they're just not that good anymore, or there's people who think the ban list should be like an extra 100 cards.
Yeah, and just for clarity, I think you and I, Eli, are generally in the camp of less banned cards, the better. Like, we don't want a bunch of new banned cards. I think I'm more or less happy with where we are now.
I think so.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a status quo-tionist, if that's even a word. Yeah, there's definitely some debate among that.
Yeah, so it's a big concern of a lot of people, and when, like you said, whenever some new card comes out and it seems like it's like super ubiquitous and everyone's just gonna play it all the time, everyone's up in arms about it and they're like, you gotta ban this card, I don't want to see it. But then there's also the side of people who are like, well, if you don't like seeing this card and you think your group is gonna abuse it, you have that Rule 0 discussion, like we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah. And
that's kind of the thing that sometimes it feels like people fall back on that to be like, whoa, chill out. If you don't like Hull Breacher, just tell everyone not to play it.
Yeah. So that's definitely a con of the mistakes they can make when printing cards for Commander. Like, they could make these mistakes in cards designed for like a standard or a modern format, but I think they're less likely to have this, big impact on Commander because they're not always, they wouldn't always be templated in a way that's, necessary for multiplayer formats and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, so the example of things like Hull Breacher or Opposition Agent, those cards feel to me like we were talking about Wizards sometimes misunderstanding like the politics cards or like the fun cards. Like, those seem to me as like them misunderstanding like we went over the philosophy document, or we've talked about like the spirit of Commander before, and that seems to me that there was some misunderstanding about like what people want out of Commander. Mm-hmm. And like, if they had just like said, well, we designed some cards in here for like CEDH, well, that'd be fine. I could see that. Like, those are designed for kind of a different way to play Commander.
Yeah, maybe that's what they need to do. Maybe they need to be more transparent about what individual cards are designed for. Because if let's say, for example, they designed Hull Breacher, and then Wizards specifically said, this was a card that we designed with CEDH in mind, maybe players would be more willing to house rule ban it or something, because it's not, quote, you know what I'm saying? Maybe there'd be some sort of thing they could do there.
Yeah, there's some people that put forward that they think there should be a separate ban list for CEDH as opposed to regular Commander. And what's your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I see the idea, right? Like, there's certain things that people want and they don't want to play, but like, I really think that's just too divisive of a change, and in general I'm not in favor of separating CEDH from EDH, because one of my biggest examples I give when I talk about this is that, what do you consider CEDH versus regular Commander, right? If it's like fast combo wins or whatever with certain CEDH level cards, you could, like, what would a deck with 90 basic forests and 10 CEDH combo cards be? Would that be a CEDH deck or a casual EDH deck?
Right.
It's really hard to kind of distinguish that. Or maybe even like an example more realistically, 40 lands, 50 vanilla creatures, and then like a backdoor, Flash Hulk or something, right? Win condition. It's a little breakfast Hulk combo in there, So it's really not. I honestly just think, CEDH and EDH are just the same format, just different extremes, right? I definitely agree. I definitely think that.
Yeah, it's just like it's different
mindsets, maybe?
divisions, or
Sure. CEDH is a subset of EDH, I would argue.
Yeah.
So if anyone tries to tell a CEDH player that they're not a Commander player, not an EDH player, I would wholeheartedly disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, I know, Eli, just a moment ago, before we talked about CEDH, you were mentioning about how, Wizards designing cards with Commander in mind, and, like, they're trying to make stuff that they think is fun for Commander.
Yeah.
And, there's something interesting to bring up, right, Eli?
Well, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if, so we have the Commander Rules Committee. People are very passionate about Commander and have a very distinct idea on what Commander should be about.
And disagree or agree with the Rules Committee, they are the forefront of the format, right?
I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say they have the best intentions for Commander. Maybe that's some people would disagree with that, but I think they do care about the game a lot, and they want people to be happy and having a good time.
And even if they may fail sometimes to understand what players really want, I think they're trying their best.
They're clearly trying. Like they made a whole separate group of people to try and get a better read on that.
That was the rules advisory group, right? Or no, Commander Advisory. Sorry, group. I was confusing that with a rules advisor, which is a thing you can be before a judge. But they made that's an example of the rules committee trying to find more perspectives to kind of keep them in line, right? Keep themselves in line. But there was actually an example just recently of Sheldon, who's kind of the head public figure, not to say that he's in charge of the rules committee, but he's the most public facing.
Yeah. He
actually went to Wizards for a couple months and helped them design the Strixhaven Commander deck, right?
Yeah, and I think he even had some, I know at least he visited there around the design of Commander Legends. I don't know how much influence he had, because I struggle to believe that Sheldon would have been not that he could stop them from doing anything, but if they were making Hull Breach or an opposition agent, they were like, hey Sheldon, what do you think of these cards? I doubt that he would be like, those are epic cards, I love those.
Those are epic for the win cards. No.
I can't believe that he was aware of those, really. But yeah, he worked on the Strixhaven Commander decks. He was actually part of the design team for the Silver Quill deck.
Yeah. And, I think that is a really good example of ways that Wizard is trying to kind of get the community's response to cards, or to design or whatever, right? They're that's a way that they're trying to key in on what Commander players really want, kind of outsourcing that to prominent members of the community. And while those members of the community may not represent all players, I think it's going to probably be a better representation than whatever Wizards, thinks internally, right?
Yeah, and we might not personally enjoy that kind of forced politics, manufactured fun cards, but Sheldon's deck was kind of built to be that kind of pillow fort, prison style of deck, and I think I've mostly seen pretty positive receptions to that deck.
I was pretty happy with it. Even I didn't play it, but I think that was, I think he did a good job. I'm going to say that. Good job, Sheldon.
And not to attribute all of the successes of Strixhaven Commander to Sheldon, specifically, but notably, we were talking about how these other precons had these staple cards in them, like Dockside Extortionist or Teferi's Protection. I don't think this year of Commander decks had any cards like that.
No.
Like we said, Archaeomancer's Map is probably the most expensive card at around $20.
Yep, and then the second most expensive card is Monologue Tax at $10, and everything else is cheaper than that. So,
and I think Archaeomancer's Map is a good card, but I don't think either of those cards are a card that you can make the argument, this goes in over 60% of white decks. I don't think that's the case for those.
Yeah, and I think that's good that these aren't these kind of go in everything staple cards. but more along just lines of like good cards that can go in good decks, right?
Yeah, and they're really fair too. Like they're 3-mana white cards that just like make you some
resource.
Yeah, they just like generate you a small resource. Like yeah,
and they're pushed enough that they're good, right?
Yeah, that's what I would like to see more of. Like not cards that are like I think sometimes when they make cards like quote for commander, they just like make a really expensive card that does like a mediocre thing. It's like, well, this card's too bad for other formats, so
it's
for
a
you guys,
commander
I guess.
card, Lamau. No, yeah, but so what do we want Wizards to do, right? Because like I believe that commander players will complain. I mean, because everyone complains.
Magic players will complain.
Will complain, either way, if they decide to go completely hands off with commander, not make cards for it, or if they, go overboard and make 40, commander sets a year. Is there a happy medium in the middle that we think we can compromise on? I think that's probably the case, but I think players will still be unhappy with it, right? So what can they do?
Well, I think, I don't know, like I said, like maybe it's just a happy accident that things turned out so well for Strixhaven Commander, but I think that's a really good example of like a year where I think everyone liked those decks, they liked the commanders, and it didn't have anything that really had anybody up in arms. Like, was there a big controversy around like Strixhaven Commander that you remember?
No, I don't think so. I think people generally were very happy with the Boros deck. They thought it was...
Right.
Yeah, so if there's not a Boros thing to complain about, there's nothing to complain about, right?
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. The metric is like, yeah, people are pretty happy with Osgear, so if they didn't have a complaint there, they didn't have one anywhere. I mean, maybe they missed the mark in a couple of the Silver Quill cards, because like I said, those were kind of like supposed to be like group hug, like politics cards, but I mean, if that's what you enjoy, then those cards are great.
Yeah, and one thing I want to bring up really quickly is that so there's this concept in Commander about players being, or not Commander, I guess Magic in general, players being unhappy with the thought of a card. So for example, I'm a person who probably wouldn't like these crazy new like very 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 like unique design choices, like something that go like, for example, they made like 20 new Planeswalker commanders, right? Mm-hmm. I probably wouldn't be very in favor of that. But I want to bring up, do players even really know what they want? Because I would tell you that, and I would say that, and I'd be pretty sure that I wouldn't like that. But the second they make a Planeswalker commander that I think is really cool, I'm gonna be like, actually, it's actually not that bad, honestly. So I think there's this concept of players not entirely knowing what they want until they see it, and that makes it really hard for Wizards to design cards, because there can be a decent outcry against certain big format warping things, but sometimes players will just like it when they actually do it.
Maybe that's an overall like that we're in favor of the large amount of commander products, because maybe it gives them more chances to kind of like test the waters, and more chances to like boil the frog. They say like if you put the frog in hot water, like right away it's going to jump out, but if you put it in there and you slowly turn the water up and you kind of test what people are willing to tolerate.
Well, yeah, and like people, there was a lot of backlash around, this isn't directly Commander related, but like around stuff like the Secret Lair of the Walking Dead, and I mean, you may disagree, but I think Wizards did see that and is probably going to adjust the way that they approach that sort of stuff. I understand that they're still doing the Universes Beyond, but I think the backlash does have an effect. So when they make these new Commander changes, I think people's reception to that will be really important. And when I say reception to that, I mean what they actually do, not what they say before the product comes out, what actually the result is after they make it, right?
Yeah, and I think there's very anti-Wizards
rhetoric,
Magic players, and yeah, like rhetoric, where people think that Wizards, like, as long as they're getting their money, like they don't care, like they're not going to change anything. But then why like have somebody like Sheldon come and help design a commander?
Yeah, what would be the purpose of that if they just kind of want to keep the status quo and not look to make people happier, right?
Yeah. So I take that as a good sign. Whatever you think of Sheldon as a person, like I think he did a good job.
For sure. And, I think just to kind of put a pin in it, I think you might have been able to tell this. I think you and I, Eli, are generally in favor of Wizards making Commander product and making cards for Commander, with some, notable exceptions of maybe there's too much product coming out too quickly.
With a few caveats.
Maybe they make some card. Maybe they have some kind of quote-unquote fun cards that we think are not very fun, and maybe they make a couple too powerful cards that are too expensive. I think those are our main concerns, but overall, I think we're pretty happy with, Commander product, right?
Yep.
So yeah, that's about what we got for the main topic of this show, but now I think we're going to start talking about our, Magic drama of the last couple weeks. Even though this whole episode's been a little bit about that, right? Magic drama.
Yeah, it's Takes Tuesday. So recently, with Modern Horizons 2, Sheldon wrote an article on Star City Games, as he is one to do.
He does that every once in a while.
I think he has like a weekly article series.
Yeah.
And he did his top 20 Commander cards in Modern Horizons 2. And at the start of that article, he has this quote, I wrote it down here, and it's Modern Horizons 2 reinforces that wheels are the unhealthiest thing in Commander, with cards like Dothy Voidwalker and Sanctifier on deck. And Gaia's Will, I suppose. This is of a deep concern to me, and is going to undergo a great deal of thought. Banning an entire class of cards is awkward at best, potentially politically suicidal at worst. I know that folks love wheels, so it gets even more difficult. There seems like no good answers at the moment, but I'd really like to look for them. Hey, you asked for more transparency, so there's a good window into my head. Note that the rest of the RC may not share my views on this particular subject.
So this, kind of thing that he wrote in his article sparked a lot of discussion on places like YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter. All of the key places for Magic the Gathering, discussion, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure I think this even might have come after there was a big discussion on Magic Twitter about wheels, sparked on by somebody else. I'm not sure who started. I know.
Was it Shivam?
I know Shivam had a tweet about it that got a lot of traffic, but it might have been somebody else that had started the discussion, and he just, hopped onto it.
So yeah, Eli, there's a lot of things to kind of cover here, but just to be very transparent and very clear, let's just say at the start that I think you agree with me, Eli, but I am not in favor of them banning a class of cards, like, for example, wheels or counter spells or anything along those lines. I think less bans the better, right?
Well, so here's the thing about that, and as far as like Sheldon wondering what they can do about it or what they should do about it, by the way the ban list works, in that like they ban a card as like an example to say we don't like this kind of card, it's not the kind of card you should be playing in Commander.
Yeah,
they banned Leovold. They did the thing that they could do for this kind of discussion. Like if you're saying that wheels are a problem, they're a problem because of cards like that make wheels abusive.
And then they banned the Leovold, but
so they banned the king of the wheel breakers
to kind of set an example. The problem with that, though, I think, is that when they keep making cards like Dothy Voidwalker, players might kind of forget about that and not associate Dothy Voidwalker as kind of a wheels card. And think what you want about that card. It's not quite the same, but
right. Yeah, I do understand that people might not be aware of that criteria they have for banning stuff, or people might be even unhappy with it. I know a lot of people are unhappy with how the rules committee runs the ban list like that, because that is a very different way to run a ban list than, say, in like other formats of Magic.
For sure. One thing that I want to just mention here real quick is that there's concerns raised about this kind of idea of Sheldon wanting to ban all the cards, and I think those concerns are fair. The idea of Sheldon quote unquote wanting to ban all these cards, as a player who likes wheels, that can be very troubling, right? You don't want the cards you love playing with to get banned, or you might think that Sheldon is kind of off his rocker or something, or he's like not he's not like on level I with the rest of the format. I think I've heard a lot of players say things like, "Oh, Sheldon just is talking out of his ass because he's playing with his play group and that's all he plays with, and they play with
oh, what did Sheldon lose to this week?"
Yeah, that's what people say. And it's kind of funny, honestly. But
do we get how many swears do we get per episode?
We get 9 swears.
Okay, if you're still doing the "what did Sheldon lose to this week" thing, just fuck off, all right?
I mean, it's a little bit overplayed.
Such a dick thing to say, like.
I mean, you probably shouldn't discredit his opinion by just saying he must have lost that card. That's probably pretty shitty to do. But I get the valid concern of that. That being said, forgive me if I'm talking too much, Eli. I've got to give you a word here eventually. Sorry for the whatever. That being said, I feel, if we look at this quote, I feel like Sheldon did a pretty good job, probably about as good as he could have done, with caveating his message, saying, banning the entire class of cards is awkward at best, potentially politically suicidal at worst. What does that imply? That they're not going to do it, right? He also said, I know folks love wheels, so it gets even more difficult. Another, acknowledgement that players like the cards, right? I know that there's no good answers, but I'm going to look for them. Not directly saying, anything about banning the cards. And then he also says, the rest of the rules committee probably doesn't agree with me. He said may not agree with me, probably doesn't agree with me. So I think that the fact that he did all that was very good of Sheldon, and he did about as good as he could do to caveat that. I don't think any reasonable person could come away thinking that he's going to ban wheels. That being said, the takeaway from that, from Magic players, was that he's going to ban wheels, right?
Yeah, and, first time I read through this article, I read this paragraph, and I straight disagree with Sheldon on this. Like, he specifically mentions, Modern Horizons 2 reinforcing that wheels are unhealthy, and then the cards that he mentions are Dathi Voidwalker, Sanctifier on Vec, and Gaia's Will. So the only one of those, to me, that even, combos with wheels at all is, Dathi Voidwalker, because it lets you play a spell for free after you wheel. Sanctifier on Vec is just going to exile some black and red cards.
Yeah.
And Gaia's Will, I guess, is going to eventually...
graveyard or something?
If you fill your graveyard with a wheel, it's going to let you play some cards back.
Yeah.
So those cards, aren't even, good with it. So I'm like, what are you even talking about, Sheldon? I guess Dathi Voidwalker, but I don't agree with that. But still, that's to say, this is his opinion.
Yeah. And also, he says the wheels are the most unhealthiest thing in the format. I think outside of interactions like Smothering Tithe and Narset, wheels really aren't a problem at all. In fact, I think they play pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, a wheel on an average case scenario, it just adds more game pieces to the game.
Yeah. So I think wheels end up playing pretty well, outside of the kind of disavowed ways to play them, right? Mm-hmm. But, that being said, like I was saying a moment ago, that I think Sheldon caveated, what he was saying pretty well. If the reaction from players is going to be Sheldon's going to ban wheels or whatever, maybe Sheldon and other rules committee members have to reapproach how they talk about these topics, because obviously they're doing something wrong. Maybe even it's not their fault, but if players come out of this article thinking that that's going to happen, maybe you just can't even mention that sort of thing, right? Maybe he has to work on how he says it.
I think he had to put out a tweet the next day or so and say something like, if you read my article with the thought that I had any intention of banning wheels whatsoever, please reread it with the idea that that's not the intent.
Yep. So, and I think, maybe he... I think he did a good job of caveating it, but maybe he needs to go even further. Maybe he needs to say at the very start, I have no intention of banning wheels whatsoever, whatever, disclaimer here for people reading or whatever, right? Maybe that would help. I think even, just not to make this too drama heavy, but I think Mitch from the Commander's Quarters had a video where the tweet associated with the thumbnail was
Rules Committee to ban all wheels in Commander?
Rules Committee talks about, quote-unquote, banning class of cards, and it's that is not what Sheldon talked about at all. He just he said, he's, when you say talks about banning class of cards, that is super clickbait and, not cool, I think. That was and then the video was 3 minutes of him reading it, and then 15 minutes of silence.
Yeah, I feel bad for Sheldon being the most public-facing member of the Rules Committee, that, especially when you write articles like this every week, where you have so many people that are just looking to interpret everything you say with so much bad faith and be so uncharitable towards you.
Yeah.
That's a rough life.
Yeah. But, Sheldon, he's gone through a lot in his life, and, I think he's able to handle it at least, right? He's a very strong man. Yeah,
even after that incident, where we said he did put out a tweet, clarifying this, he takes a lot of heat and a lot of hate that I've seen, and we follow him on Twitter, and I rarely see him comment on it or really complain.
He never vents or whatever. Yeah, so I mean, Eli, you and I have our fair share of disagreements with Sheldon and the Rules Committee, but for the amount of hate that they get, I think you should try to be a little bit more charitable when they say things, maybe.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention too is I think I was looking through the EDH subreddit, and there was a post about this article, and they were just kind of dunking on Sheldon because I think he maybe misunderstood some rules interactions or something on a couple of cards.
Like with
on grief. Like thinking the evoke cards, like he inferred that like he thought that they stuck around maybe, and that's an easy mistake to make, I guess.
Yeah, everyone makes mistakes.
Especially if you don't like, if you maybe like didn't catch it in proofreading or something. But it's just this whole thread of like people dunking on him, and what I notice is people have this idea that Sheldon, because he's so public, that he's like the head of the rules committee. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they have like, there's not a king of the rules committee. There's not like a president.
I think it's a pretty democratic process, and they all have discussions and make decisions together, right?
I think they all have an equal say, and I think that's how it should work.
Yeah, and they've even got. I mean, the rules advisory group or I said it again. The commander advisory group. I don't think they don't have a direct say at all in what the rules committee does, but they do get to inform them and help them make their decisions.
Yeah, like, say 5 people on the CAG could tell the RC, hey, I think you guys should ban this card, but that doesn't mean that they're actually ever going to do it.
They're just going to take that as anecdotes, to kind of try to inform a decision, more or less, I think.
Yeah, and people should remember when Sheldon talks about stuff, it's not like Sheldon has, like, he doesn't get an extra vote in the meetings or whatever.
He doesn't have that white card that gives him an extra vote. Sorry.
Yeah, so he, when he says something, just remember, it's usually just his opinion. Like, if you had to write an article series, like, every week, like we do the podcast, and sometimes we'll dunk on people when they say something cringe or, like, something that just doesn't make any sense and be like, what are they even talking about? But then I'll listen back to our podcast and I'll be like, what are we even talking about? When you talk enough, you're gonna say some stuff that doesn't make any sense. So I'm sure that's the case with the Sheldon articles.
Yeah, if there's enough eyes on you, I think you'll get scrutinized enough to find mistakes. And we're lucky, Eli, that we don't have enough viewers for them to catch all the stupid shit we say. But if you'd like to tell me what I said that was stupid, dunk on me in the comments.
I'm so excited for our first hate comment.
I'm so excited, yeah.
You guys are freaking dumb. You don't know how Metamai the Ageless works.
But I think. Is there anything else you want to say about the Sheldon situation? Anything left? Because I think that about covers it, right?
Yeah, pretty much just leave Sheldon alone.
Leave Sheldon alone. Sorry, this was the Sheldon episode, wasn't it?
Yeah, thank you, Sheldon.
Yeah.
Get in some more trouble, and we'll have something for next week.
Say something real dumb so I can go back to making fun of you instead of singing your praise. I joke. But, that's about, what we got. Is there anything you want to say at the end to just kind of, maybe say what our takeaways are for this episode, right?
Yeah, so overall, I think more Commander products. Like, we love Commander, and everybody likes being catered to a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Oh, to answer the question, no, I don't think Commander is ruining Magic. I guess we probably should answer that in the title, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I guess I would say I'd lean on the side of, yeah, it's not ruining Magic, obviously. Magic is fine. Sometimes I feel like Commander players are ruining Magic for me. But that's a different episode.
That is kind of that's Commander by proxy. We were like, right, there you go.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. I played at a pre-release recently, and that's 1v1 Magic, and I didn't feel like I had a negative interaction that whole night. But I'll play some Commander games, and I'll feel so bad afterwards. So I'm just like,
yeah, outside of some Commander or some Magic player, funk, in their armpits or something,
Yeah,
but that's that's a personal hygiene thing, and you know what? Sometimes that's gonna happen.
It'll be another episode
at your LGS. Maybe take a shower or something.
So yeah, let us know what you think. If we're off base on anything on here, the Sheldon stuff, or if you've got the case for why Sheldon is a terrible bastard man and needs to be locked away,
no, I'd be willing to hear it, because obviously I stood up for Sheldon a lot in this episode, but if you have some opinions about him that you disagree with me on, I'll read that with as much charity as I can, and I'll take it into consideration. Okay?
Yeah, and like we said, we disagree with him and his opinions a lot of the time, but I still think he's a pretty good guy, and I think the Rules Committee mostly does a pretty good job.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Don't think they're lacking integrity or anything like that.
But that's the premise of the show, is we want to hear as many opinions as possible and get a better understanding for everything.
Yep. And if you have a less fun card than Aeon Engine, please let me know.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to find one.
Specifically one like made for Commander.
Yeah.
Because like I know there's definitely like stuff like
I get
cards
it. I get it. Boil is less fun. Well, it's not less fun if you're,
It's fun when you're casting it.
It's fun when you're casting it. Unless you're casting on yourself. Then it's kind of like a mutually assured destruction thing, right? But I think that's about all we got, right?
But yeah, give us a like, a subscribe. Please, yeah, like we said, comment about anything. You can find us on Twitter at EDHTakes.
On your local podcast app, EDHTakes as well. Everything except for iTunes, I think.
Yeah, I've been Elijah Samuelson.
And I'm Spencer Cook.
All right, we'll see you next time.